Ayo.
All right. Welcome back to your Everyday Rich podcast. We're your hosts. I'm Jen.
I'm Jason Coe. Thanks for joining us. Discount sales and deals with retail and everything you can buy is happening.
Mm-hmm.
And with that, there is a frenzy of probably money being spent on stuff people don't need. But in today's macro environment, I'm actually very curious to see how that pans out with overall spending. Because obviously things cost a lot more. So people are, I would say, a lot more picky on, I know I am, we're much more picky on the deals that we get.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll see how that data pans out in the next couple months of how Amazon's numbers and retail and all that stuff. But it got me thinking about this TikTok, this someone sent an Instagram about someone shopping on at the premium outlet malls, which really aren't discount malls in my opinion, but it's like 6:30 in the morning on Friday, and it was packed.
Yeah.
Parking lot was full apparently.
Yeah.
And it got to this whole point of like, people are willing to wake up really early to shop for some maybe some mediocre deal that they might, who knows, right? I don't know if these people are like targeting a specific thing, because I feel like everything at the outlet malls are pretty much discounted already.
Yeah.
And then it's this idea of like, okay, well, you're willing to like go up this early to line up for something,
Get a deal.
to get a deal, one-time deal, right? But like, then you hear a lot of people complaining about like not willing to wake up early to prioritize something in their life, like to get better at something. Let's say go to the gym. It's an easy example, right? Waking up early to get to the gym. That's hard. Nobody wants to do that. But you know what's easy? Getting up early to go shop. Why? I don't understand.
It's a different type of motivation, I guess.
I think just priorities are just kind of fucked
Yeah.
up with people.
Yeah.
Right. And that's the consumer mentality, right? We're in this consumer fed world that, it's just easy to spend money rather than work on hard things that make you better. But anyways, this is kind of a mini rant there. But I will say, like, back in the day, there was one time where, remember me and you, we woke up with some of our friends, and this is dating back to us, like, we're like in our late 20s maybe. And we lined up at this store called Sporting Life at like 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning.
Yep.
It was packed already. It was lined up like to around the corner.
Yep.
But we were specifically looking for,
I was looking for boots.
you were looking for boots, and I was looking for a winter jacket, like a North Face kind of Canada Goose thing before Canada Goose got really big.
Yeah.
It was actually half off or 40% off.
Yeah.
And when you're talking about $1,000 jacket, that's big money.
Yeah.
So back then, I was willing to wake up to save $500.
Would you do that today? If you had to wake up to get yourself
it depends
half
on what
price on $1,000 jacket?
I don't know.
A goose jacket. Let's say a goose jacket was half price.
If I really needed it, maybe. But do I need $1,000 jacket? I don't know, man.
Probably not.
Yeah, exactly. So, they are pretty warm.
Yep, they are.
But as we were coming back, anyways, in this whole thing where, a couple months ago, we finished this book called "The Psychology of Money" by Morgan Housel. It's right here, showing up in the YouTube on video here.
On the YouTube.
On the YouTube.
Oh, sorry, reminds you of the movie. What's the movie what's his name?
The Intern.
Intern. No, is it called The Intern? No, not The Intern.
Internship?
Something. It's on the line. What with the guy from Dumb and Dumber. Not Jim Carrey, but the other one. Owen Wilson.
Oh, Owen Wilson. Yeah.
It's on the line.
I think it was The Internship.
On the line. No, it's not. No, The Internship is one with Robert De Niro.
Oh, okay.
And Hathaway.
But we could take pictures and post them on the line.
On the line. Online. No, on the line. Okay. On the YouTube.
Yeah, on the YouTube. But yeah, The Psychology of Money by Morgan Housel. Actually, really, really solid book. It's actually one of my favorite books on money and financial literacy.
Yeah.
It actually should be on top of this our recording mantle here, but I lent it out to someone, and we figured that we want to have this series of mini talks, because we find this book very relatable. It's got a lot of really good points on just how people think about money, like wealth, greed, happiness,
Hmm.
like consumerism, and oftentimes that we often don't look at it like straightforward. We make it too complicated, but he breaks it down and makes it so easy to read. So we're going to call this the uh, psychology of money living room conversation series. Oh, that's too long.
That's really long. Okay.
Okay, call it
We'll,
the
we'll,
money
we'll find a better name.
psychology of money talk series. How about that? Okay, and specifically, like, kind of wrapping around like this whole spending season,
Hmm.
right? People are going out buying like more bigger TVs, and they're going out to buy more clothes, going out to buy more shit.
Hmm.
It comes to a point where it's like, when is enough in general,
Yeah.
right? And in his chapter 3, he basically talks about like, when is enough, like the psychology behind that. So
It never is enough, I feel like, with everybody.
yeah, and it's strange, right? Because the example he gives is Bernie Madoff, the famous market maker on financial Wall Street. Like, a market maker, if you don't know, is someone who pairs buyers and sellers of stocks, right? So essentially, they call it like the middleman of stock market. And he was famous for his Ponzi scheme. But this guy was making like 80 million a year to 100 million a year. Yet he still wanted more. It was all fake. Obviously, it was just a big Ponzi scheme. But like, at what point, like, you're making 80 million a year?
Hmm.
What drives someone to like need more, right? And so that whole thing about enough is, if you just relate it back to Europe, maybe you're not making $80 million, so it's kind of hard to relate.
Yeah.
Um, you might be making enough money enough for you to purchase whatever you need for the rest of your life, right? Your
Hmm.
basic needs, just fulfill your happiness, etc. Then how do you decide when is enough? How do we look at that?
That's a tough question
It is.
because I feel like for me personally, I always feel like it's not enough. Like we think of just simple things like shoes. There's never enough shoes. Like you always when you're like, oh, I wish I had a pair of whatever. Oh, I wish I had a shirt this color, or I wish I had this shirt that would match these pair of pants. Like there's always something that is missing. I feel like
Yeah,
it's a psychology thing. I know.
I think it, definitely, and there's a few reasons here, like that we're going to get into. But you're right. Like, I can relate to that. It's this whole thing about like, comparing to the Joneses too, right? So it's
Oh
like,
yeah,
feel like, oh, my shitty Corolla, Toyota Corolla or Honda Civic. Shut. If you're driving a Toyota Corolla or Honda Civic, this is no shade on you guys. Like, I tell me,
they're solid
solid
cars,
cars. Like, if you're rich people want reliability too. So
solid reliable cars,
yeah,
cheap maintenance.
exactly. But you might be thinking, oh, I'm driving this shit box,
Hmm.
and you're like, oh, you see this person drive by with like a Beamer.
Hmm.
You're like, man, I wish I had a Beamer, right? And then that person in the Beamer is driving around and sees someone in a Lambo. It's like, damn, I wish I had a Lambo. And then the person in the Lambo sees someone in a helicopter, be like, damn, I wish I had a helicopter.
Yeah, and that person, and then when you actually get to that, so
Yeah,
let's say the person with the Civic finally gets the Beamer,
yeah,
then they're going to be the person who looks at the next car,
yep,
right? It's like you got the Beamer now. It's like now, can I get the Lambo or the whatever?
yeah. And this is part of how, like, from a financial literacy and just financial education, um, it's one of the hardest things to do, right? And we're gonna go into like 4 reasons about like how this whole enough is enough, right? How do you ever like how will we be able to maintain this sense of enough?
Hmm.
Um, and the first thing and the hardest thing in in financial literacy or any like finances, when it comes to that kind of psychology, um, like the hardest financial skill that you'll have to develop is to get the goalpost to stop moving.
Yeah.
So that's number one.
And that's tough today
Yeah.
with social media, with so much external influence. Like, it's hard to keep the goalpost
Yeah.
still.
And that goes to kind of like this whole thing about that example of like the Civic, Beamer, helicopter, spaceship.
Yeah.
like it, the goalpost, because you're always moving the goalpost,
Yeah.
and it's really easy. Like when you taste having more, right? That taste of success, right? It increases your ambition faster than actually your satisfaction.
Yeah.
So and part of that is like Morgan Housel puts it that way. It's like, it's like flying first class. When you fly first class, or let's say business, you're like, oh, I'm gonna always want to fly first class.
Yeah. It's hard for me to go back.
It's hard for it to go back, right? And don't get me wrong. Hey, listen, I think you should all have big goals and plan for like doing better. Don't get me wrong. Like I don't want to fly economy, right?
Hmm.
So if you're able to get there, then great. That's a great goal. But then at some point, like you're gonna have to ask yourself, like, well, how much more do I need, right? Because like after first class, then you get to like private jet.
I was going to say, just buy your own plane.
Yeah, seriously, no, really, seriously, yeah. But you hear all the stars, right? And they talk about like, I saw a recent interview with Akon. He was talking about how like one of the biggest mistakes he made was buying a private jet. He's like, bro, it's like $4 million a year in maintenance.
That's crazy.
He's like, what the fuck? Why? Like, I don't even fly that much. You know what I mean? So it's that whole thing. Like once you have it, you're like, oh, great, I have a private jet. But then you realize how much money you bleed.
Yeah.
So this whole thing about the goalposts, and if you just kind of think about it in terms of your own story, your own journey, like we're always moving the goalpost, because like you move one step forward, then the post moves two steps ahead of you. So it feels like you're never able to keep up,
Yeah.
and that goes back
Well,
to what you were saying.
yeah. When it's always like, there's always people's message like, oh, like, don't be content or satisfied. Always reach for the stars,
Yeah, take on more
right?
risk,
Take on,
10x everything. Yep.
yeah. Like, there's that message where, if you're just doing or sitting satisfied, then you're not good enough or you're complacent,
Hmm.
right? There's that message out there saying, hey, you're always gonna like, you need to always work for something and like, you always need to like set these goals and like keep going and shoot for like the best. And that's where it comes from, right? So that's
Hmm.
why the goalpost keeps moving,
Yep.
right? Because these messages are like drilled into your brain.
Yeah. And it's conflicting as well, because from one point, I do agree that everyone should have big ambitions, right? We should set lofty ambitions for us to hit, because it's that whole thing of like, you shoot for the stars, you land on the moon,
Yeah.
right? But often, too many times, we're always just trying to shoot for the star and we never land on anything.
Yeah. Yeah.
So at some point where you're going to take on more risk to do everything, and that goalpost just keeps getting further and further, because everything just keeps trying to get bigger, and they
Hmm.
don't realize at the end of it, you're like, what the fuck am I doing all this for, right?
Hmm.
Because and one thing that Morgan Housel actually puts the phrase in terms of the goalpost, like, happiness is results minus expectation. That's it, right? Like, you're saying, how many more shoes do you need? Well,
Yeah.
why are you not happy with the amount of shoes you have?
Yeah.
It's because your expectation of happiness is having more shoes,
Yeah.
because you see people like Mariah Carey in their closet on the MTV Cribs with like 1,000
Thousand.
shoes,
Yeah.
and you're like, fuck, I wonder if she must be happy with 1,000 shoes.
Yeah.
Last time I checked, Mariah Carey's probably not very happy. Sorry, Nick Cannon.
Nick Cannon. Nick Cannon was like
Yeah, Nick Cannon was.
back in the day.
Yeah, yeah.
That's old news.
But anyways, yeah, that's the goalpost, right? And if you're able to control the goalpost enough, actually might be enough. Second part in this enough conversation is like you already touched on this, like social comparison, right? Number
Yeah.
two, social comparison is actually probably the main factor of why we feel like we don't have enough, because we're always comparing ourselves to someone ahead of us, right? So a friend of ours, a friend of mine, ours, but talking to him on during a meetup, during a poker meetup, and he was chatting about how like this whole phenomenon of us feeling like we don't have, what the next person has.
Mhm.
This he gave an analogy about you driving a whatever your shitbox on the highway, and a Lambo pulls up beside you, and this is during COVID. Okay,
Mhm.
just giving the example when it's at nighttime or whatever. There's no traffic.
Mhm.
You're driving 100 kilometers an hour, and all of a sudden this Lambo pulls up behind you and beside you. You're both driving 100 kilometers an hour, but you feel like you're driving much slower than this Lambo. Why? Well, because like
You're so
society has defined that if you have that, you're successful,
yeah.
right? Don't get me wrong. Like I know people that have Lambos, uber successful, but that doesn't mean that you need to have that to define your success.
Mhm.
So like, again,
Stop
it, it,
comparing.
it never ends because that ceiling is like this ceiling that always keeps getting taller and
Taller and
taller.
taller, yeah. It just never ends. So how do you stop it?
Well, it'd be easy. We just say get off social media, but social media is very addictive.
Yeah.
And I'd be lying to say, but like, oh, you just cut off all your social media. No, you can't. It's in a way, it's almost how we stay connected with people.
Mhm.
Right? It's very easy. It's like, yo, what's your IG, right? If we don't
Yeah.
text, we just IG. We don't text.
Yeah.
But I don't know. It's tough. It's tough saying get off social, but it's also asking yourself, like, you know, who are you comparing to? I think first of all, because I think psychologically, we're always going to compare to people.
Yeah, it's human nature.
It's human nature to compare. Like we're always comparing to each other
Mhm.
in some weird way. We're comparing to our friends.
Yep.
Our family compares us to other relatives,
Yep.
right? Our friends are comparing us to them,
Mhm.
right? So I don't know what the answer is. What do you think?
I don't know either. It's a tough
Yeah.
it's a tough thing to figure out, right? Other than yeah, shut off social media or cut yourself off from everybody else, but that's not really possible. So,
Yeah. And like it's funny because like Morgan Housel actually doesn't give you he doesn't give you any
a
answers here.
solution, a
Because there's no
solution to
there's
this.
no solution, right? But just recognizing that social comparison is a real thing, and if you recognize that you're always comparing yourself to someone, then at least you can kind of start with that,
Yeah.
right? To say first of all, okay, well, why am I even doing that, right? So um a funny example is in terms of the social comparison. So we interviewed my friend Ron Esteban on, I forgot what episode, but and we talk about lawn care, right?
Yep.
And so this whole thing about lawn care, where now when I'm driving around, remember we're driving around and we're looking at our
Oh,
own neighborhood.
that person's nice lawn.
Look at hey, that guy's, oh man, he's really keeping up his lawn, and it's like, man, I gotta go do something about my lawn. So that's a way of social comparison.
But that's a positive one, I think, because then it like drives you or motivates you to do your own lawn.
Or hire it out and get it better. But that, you know what, that's a good way to look at it. If it's a positive influence, a positive social influence that will do better for yourself, it'll help you do better. Perhaps that's one way to
Yeah.
look at social media positively, right?
Yeah.
So it's understanding what you're watching.
Yeah. I think to answer the previous question, now I think about more. I think you really have to understand your why and your intention.
Mm.
I think if you stay grounded with those two things, then the social comparison somewhat goes away because that person that you're comparing yourself to has their own why intention, which is not the same as yours, right? So if your why intention doesn't align with theirs, which is most likely it won't, like why would you be the same thing? Right? So if you stay grounded with your why, your intention, then that directs you to the right path on what your intention and your goals are. right? Versus comparing yourself to that other person.
Yeah, well said.
So,
It's true. Yeah, it's true. Oftentimes we're kind of just driving blindly, right? Just
yeah, if they're doing it, I'm doing it.
yep.
It must be good if they're doing it.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
why are they doing it?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, it's true. It's this whole thing about like, business media influencers online, they're talking about how like, how I made $1 million, right? And it's like getting up at 5:30 in the morning and doing yoga and then practicing meditation and then taking cold plunges and writing their gratitude journal. It's like, what the fuck? No, they just do the work. They just did the work and they had a strong why on why they were
Yeah.
doing it,
Yeah.
right? Which got them to the point of their success. And now at their level of success, it affords them the opportunity to do all these things like cold plunges and taking 30-minute meditations and then walking around the block for 2 hours and working out for an hour and a half, all before 10 o'clock in the morning.
Yep.
Right. So, yeah, you're right. Like, having a why is important.
Yeah.
Um, and this whole thing about like, when you were saying about the social media influences about how you having to like supercharge and supersize your goals,
Yeah.
or you're not doing something big enough, it's not important, and
Don't be complacent.
don't get complacent. And complacency is another word for like enough, right?
Yeah.
And enough sounds lame.
Yeah.
It's not sexy, it's not
Com-
exciting.
Complacency is weak,
Yeah, and this is number 3, right? Number
right?
3 is enough is not
Yeah.
sexy.
We get the notion that complacency is weak, is for people who are lazy, is for people who are
No
no
ambition.
ambition. It's all these negative
Yeah.
things, right? So that it makes you feel like, oh, I'm not doing enough. I need to do more. I'm not lazy. I'm not like that type of person. I want to be, you know, the person living 2 steps ahead and shooting for the stars, right? So that's the external influence that we get.
Yeah, and here's kind of uh, my opinion on this part. Whereas if you haven't asked yourself why you feel like you need to do something 10x, and you're looking across the street into that mansion, and you're wondering, man, that person must be living an amazing life because they live in this huge house and they drive these nice cars and whatever, right?
Yeah.
However you want to socially compare, and you feel like you don't have enough, right? Because it's not sexy. You don't know what type of life they're actually living, that person
You
across the
don't.
street,
You don't.
right?
You don't know what happens behind closed
You don't know
doors.
what happens. And this is the problem, is that when you're only seeing the veil of the outside of someone's life, what they want to show you
Hmm.
versus what's actually happening behind the scenes.
Yeah.
And like I said, I love numbers. Stats don't lie. And a lot of people that are driving the really fancy car, that live in the big ass house, that buy those Gucci belts, those luxury designer brands, actually probably aren't doing very well,
Hmm.
or they're struggling, right? Because they're trying to maintain this lifestyle. Because to them, enough doesn't mean having just simplicity, like a minimalist lifestyle.
Hmm.
So,
Well, they're into the trap of the social comparison, right? Because
yeah.
they're striving to be somebody that's ahead of them.
And in chapter 3, like, gives a good example about, it's like this going to a buffet analogy, right? So we will never know how it feels like to be so full by eating so much until we vomit, right? But we know, like, it feels uncomfortable to vomit.
Hmm.
So we actually don't eat to that point. Like, we know we
Yeah.
won't go that far.
Yeah.
But in investing and in the finances world, you really stop when you either are forced to stop or you break. And what that means is like you push yourself so far to take all these bigger risks that you actually you don't know that feeling of like stopping
Mhm.
because you haven't felt that risk yet.
Mhm.
And often the times you end up
Losing
stopping,
money.
losing money.
Yep.
And that's the point that makes you stop,
Yep.
right? So it's kind of it's an interesting analogy, but I find it weird that we don't apply that to our lives. A lot of people can't apply that to their lives.
Yeah.
Um, and I could tell you like a good example is like trading, right? So like trading, you can always want more. Like it's like stock market trading. I'm talking stock market trading,
Mhm.
right? It's like you can always want more. You can win bigger, and then until you actually lose, then you realize, oh shit,
I shouldn't. I
I
should
shouldn't.
stop.
I shouldn't have. I should have stopped. And like as you trade, you learn all these things about like stop losses, and you actually force yourself to like learn the hard way. But if you if you 10 times like those risks,
Mhm.
then you might get to a point where you can never recover. So, um, don't let the mighty dollar push you to the point of regret.
Yeah.
So sometimes enough is actually
Enough.
enough. Um, and lastly, number 4, in this conversation is really some things are never
Worth the
worth
risk.
the risk.
Yeah.
So no matter how big you want to grow, no matter how huge you want to do something, there are things that you should never ever risk or sacrifice
Mhm.
to get there. Right? And these are things that are you can never buy back with money.
Yep.
And these things are reputation, right?
Mhm.
Because your reputation to everyone, and this goes back to the social comparison, right?
Yeah.
You lose your reputation, and nobody's going to give a shit about you,
Yeah.
right? No one will trust you. Think about it, right? Your reputation means a lot in today. It always has.
Yep. And especially if you own a business too, right?
Yeah, yeah. Your family and your friends.
Mhm.
As unfortunate, you always hear stories about like family and friends being burned in business deals or anything involving money.
Yep.
That- That's something that you should never risk.
Yeah.
But um, freedom and independence should never risk that, right? So
That's an intangible.
it's an intangible. So imagine, what do I mean by freedom and independence? So having the freedom to walk the street versus walking within your jail cell.
Mhm.
That's what I mean about freedom, right? So putting yourself at a risk where, like Bernie Madoff, just couldn't stop. His greed drove him,
Yeah. End up
or
in
maybe
jail.
he was ego, and now he gets to,
Well, yeah, it's probably his ego. I got away with.
yeah,
I'm getting away with this for so long, and I'm making a shitload of money,
yeah,
and I'm getting away with this.
yeah, like,
And then eventually, it didn't work out.
yeah, he got to like now he instead of cruising around the oceans of in his yacht, now he gets to cruise around in a little tiny bowl in his cell.
Yep.
And lastly,
Your happiness.
yeah, you should never sacrifice your happiness.
That's
And
because what else are we doing this for?
yeah,
If you're not gonna be happy doing it,
exactly. Whether
what's the
it's
point?
whether it's your money, your health, your family, like your anything. It's like
Like,
whatever creates your happiness, right? And remember, happiness is the results minus expectation.
yeah,
So just think about it. If my expectations are pretty low and I get extraordinary results, I'm going to be super happy.
yeah,
Or even just above ordinary, I will be happy,
yep,
right? But on the flip side, I do want to say this. Enough is only enough for you when you decide what you want.
Well, yeah. How do you know enough is enough? You don't know
Yeah.
what enough is.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
It does. And that's what makes this topic so tricky, right? So, that's we found like everything in this book was so solid where it's very relatable and it makes you ask very hard questions about your own
Yep.
financial journey and how you look at money, right? Because at the end of it, when you're able to understand how money, affects your life,
Yep.
you're
Or the way
able
you think about money,
the way you yes,
how it affects your life.
yeah, how it affects your life, whether it's like how you spend it, how you make it, and your relationship with money.
Yeah.
It gives you a different perspective on the decisions you can make,
Yep.
right? And how you're able to live your everyday rich. Because at the end of the day, right, when we talk about your everyday rich, it's
That's your happiness
it's your
that we talk
happiness,
about. Yeah.
right?
Your happiness. You're enough.
Is it enough, right?
Yep.
Are these two chairs that we have in our podcast right now enough?
For now, yeah. See? But in my mind, maybe we should upgrade them at some point. See?
Yeah.
First it was Costco chairs. Now we've upgraded to these wonderful blue chairs. When is enough enough?
Good question, Jennifer. What is your why? But yeah, we figured that we wanted to start this whole series of just breaking down the psychology of money, and because we feel that there are so many tangible lessons and relatable things in this that just talking about chapter 3 in this episode, we felt like it's a good way to introduce some of these concepts to you if you haven't read the book,
Yep.
but just really get you to think about your own financial journey on this. So like I said, figuring out enough is not as easy as just snapping your fingers,
No.
but realizing and understanding how it works behind the scenes can at least get you as a starting point.
Yep.
So
To me, your enough is your everyday rich.
yeah.
That's what we're all striving for, right? Is to figure out what is the enough
Mm-hmm.
and to live that enough. That makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. Like getting enough sleep.
Yes.
That
That's
makes that
part
makes
of
me very happy.
that's part of my everyday rich is getting enough sleep.
Right? See, here's the funny thing, right? It's like other people on the other side, they're like, fuck that, you only need 5 hours of sleep.
I can't.
I don't know about you, man.
I
I
can't
can't function on
function.
5 hours sleep.
I can't function.
But hey, maybe that's makes them happy, right? But
Sure.
then they look like 75-year-olds when they're like 40 because they haven't slept in like 12 years.
I don't know if their body's happy about that.
Yeah. Anyways, we'll do another series of psychology of money.
Yeah, and share more points that
Yeah.
we've taken from the book.
Yeah, hopefully share more of our journey and see if that's something that you guys can relate to yours. But if you enjoyed this, we ask you to share these living room conversations so that other people can have these open dialogues amongst themselves
Mhm.
and ask these kind of questions about like these taboo topics that millennials really never really talked about.
Yeah.
And we want you to talk about and learn about this so that it becomes part of your language, and it becomes and helps build your journey, right? Because without knowledge, without the information, without understanding how this works, we're just how are we able to get better and grow,
Mm-hmm. For sure.
right? So anyways, appreciate all the support. We're gonna wrap this one up.
Alrighty.
All right, and we will see you next time.
See ya.
All right, peace.
Your Everyday Rich podcast is presented solely for general informational, educational, and entertainment purposes. Any such information or other material should not be construed as legal, tax, investment, financial, or other advice. It is not intended as a substitute for the advice of a qualified professional.